Thank you, Daniel and Esther. This is the last part of the common aspects of the work across different technical use cases. Sorry, wrong direction. Data level obligations, it was mentioned that those are forming part of the conformance framework, of course. And I'm now supposed to describe them a little bit. Why we need it? That's the first question. Because if we have constraints on the structure, specifications of resources that we are going to use to express the information that we need to express, why we need anything else? Part of those structured constraints are cardinalities, as you heard, data types, business rules, which has not been mentioned, but we can express relationship between elements in FHIR through a formal logic which is processable and testable. But that still is not enough, because we don't want basically to have 50 different types of IGs for 50 different types of medical specialties and 1,000 different types of IGs for every possible case of the patient. That's why we have an IG which is relatively general, that must work in all cases of all patients, in all types of departments from which the patient is being discharged. Consequence of that is that we have a relatively small number of really mandatory fields. Everything else is optional. We could elaborate, of course, those business rules saying, for example, if the specialty is this, we expect also this information to be filled, but obligations seems to be a more flexible way how to express or how to achieve the same objectives. Basically, we had long discussions which tools to use, how to achieve that flexibility based on the expected functions of the different kind of information solutions. But from the beginning, it was clear that we are going to utilize something that already has been revealed or prepared by HL7, and that's called the obligation framework. That gives us the basic specifications of on the method, how to specify systems as actors which are fulfilling some basic roles. The whole discussion, which lasted several weeks or months, if I remember well, was about the selection of roles that we want to include in our deliverables and selections of concrete operations that we want to ask the information systems providers to demonstrate ability to fulfill them. The original framework actually has about 10 or 12 different obligations that we could use, but we ended up actually with, if I don't remember, 3 only. And that was the obligation to populate some content into a particular data element, to display that content, or process it. The processing obligation is quite strange, because that just says process according to the specification, which means that we have to specify what we mean by processing. That's why we use that quite rarely, because that was additional work that we could not fully fulfill within that time framework that we had. So that's a little bit about the basis for the obligation framework. And thank you, Andreas, for making the slides so nice, but now I have difficulties to find myself in it. Okay, I already have said everything which is on the slide, so we can save some time for others, maybe. Okay, we have selected actually 3 different, or specified 3 different actors. The systems which are producing something, that's the producers, obviously. Systems which are receiving the information, the consumers, and something in between. Of course, that was inspired by the HDS regulation, where the intermediary are the exchangers. In the second column, you can see the obligations that we have selected from the framework for the producers, just the ability to populate. We had a long discussion with Commission about the other one that we proposed to use, that was populate if known, but because of the difficulties of explaining the meaning of their definition, we dropped that out. From the consumers, as I mentioned, we have selected two, display and process. On the most right-hand side column, you can see the definitions. And for the exchanger, there is just one obligation, that they should not alter the content. By not altering that, it doesn't mean that they cannot touch it, but they cannot change the clinical meaning of, or substantially change the clinical meaning. So the transformation, if there is any, must be very safe. And actually, if they change it, they are acting as the consumer or the producer. So another obligations then apply to them as well. So that's, for example, the case of NCP, which is transcoding and translating content. So in fact, it acts as a producer of the content and should be tested according to the producer obligations. There is one more component of the framework, and that's the strength of the obligation requirement. And here we had also some difficulties because we had to drop the populate if known, and that's why we had to slightly modify the shall requirement, the strength for the obligation shall, which is usually understood as being mandatory, or at least according to the ISO standard definitions. And we have to add the additional rule saying that omission of shall element may be permitted if there is corresponding capability, if such corresponding capability is permanently out of the scope of the system that claims conformance. That does not depend only on the system vendor, but also on the expectations, the ghost in the machine, expectations from its users or regulators, which might require some functionality. So that's the whole framework. I think this is my last slide. Just show you how it looks like in the logical model in its formal representation, and a part of the elements that Daniel have already mentioned, like cardinalities, data types. We have additional information which says for the systems that are acting as producers, they shall be able to populate this value. And that's all from my side. Thank you very much.